Welcome back to Central Valley Talk. I'm your host, Mike Briggs. We used to call this show Central Valley Authors and Artists, but because COVID forced us to learn a Zoom technology, we've changed the whole name to Briggs on Books, because we talk to people not from the Central Valley, but all over the world now, every week, almost every day, right here on this show, Briggs on Books. By the way, our next guest, I believe, is from Seattle, Washington. I want to introduce you to Iris Fisher-Smith. Welcome, Iris.
Thanks for having me, Mike. It's nice to be back.
Yeah, you've been here a couple times, and first
Yes.
of all, you're fascinating. I love to have you on the show. And your book is about family, and it started with your grandmother, the Bolshevik Revolution. Tell us a little bit about that.
My grandmother, at 18 years old, went through the Bolshevik Revolution back in 1918, the height of also another pandemic back then.
That's right.
And she had to flee Russia. She lost several family members, her parents. I think out of 11 children, she came over here with just 2 others. They were either killed or they were, they got very sick because of the pandemic and died.
Yeah.
She was also separated from her fiancé, that she didn't know whether he lived or died. And so now, the whole book is kind of a family history, and it starts with her.
We say this one thing on this show all the time to different authors. They say, this is made for a movie or a TV series, but you're actually going to do that with your book.
Yeah, there's a producer. Her name is Judy Bell, if you want to show a picture of her.
Yeah, there she is.
She optioned to have it adapted into an episodic series for television. Today they call it an episodic series because now you have 10 episodes, whereas when you had miniseries, it was just like 3 nights of, filming. Yeah. Now you've got 10 episodes, which is considered a whole season.
And there was a young man on last time. There was a young man on last time that was, I think, helping you write it, or the screenplay?
He's my co-writer, Vincent Olmos. He and I are co-writing together. He was with a film school in Los Angeles, and I was able to get his name from someone, and he came alongside of me, and he's, helping write the screenplay with me.
Now, I think we have a picture of him, too, but he's in a different outfit this time.
Yeah, he's just joined the Army Reserves, and he just graduated, and he'll be back in July to resume working with me. Like I said, right now there's a writer's strike happening, and so it has slowed down the process of doing the episodic series a little bit. And but as soon as the writer's strike is over, then my producer should be able to go back and resume getting before the networks with the series.
Now, I watch a lot of series now. I'm probably started with COVID or whatever, but you sit down and you watch them all in like 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
And like you said, a series used to be maybe 3 shows or something, but now they're done like this. I like it a lot better.
Yeah.
By the way,
those were called mini-series back then, and now they're called episodic series.
By the way, your background is great. I see the, what do you call the Space Needle?
The Space Needle, yeah.
Is that Mount Rainier?
Yep, that's Mount Rainier.
Yeah, I don't know a lot about Seattle, but those are the only 2 things I know about the whole state of Washington. Now, you're telling us a little about the book before I interrupted. Your grandmother lost track of her fiancé, a lot of her family members.
Yeah.
And without,
she had to come over here, on a boat back then, and they had many boats coming over to have people immigrate from Europe at the time during that whole, Bolshevik Revolution experience, which was horrible. It was much like what was happening in Europe during Germany. Mm-hmm. The Jews were being persecuted, and, their homes were burned, they were looted, they were thrown out. So my grandmother, at the age of 18, had to literally escape with a guide by herself and come over here and try to meet up with the 2 siblings that were remaining. And, by the grace of God, she was able to find them, and also through records, at Ellis Island. And the ship experience was not a cruise ship experience. It was very, very hard, because you had people dying of the pandemic. You had people at the bottom of the boat, which was called in steerage, and they were just piled on top of one another. By the time the trip was ending, you had people laying next to dead bodies, and there was a terrible stench. And So it wasn't a cruise ship experience, but she survived, and miraculously, she never caught, the pandemic,
Yeah.
the flu. It was called the Spanish flu back then,
Right. Now,
but it was very deadly.
where did she go after Ellis Island? Where did she go? What
She
city?
went to Boston.
Boston, okay.
My family ended up immigrating into Boston, and that's where I come from. And so I had some of my family immigrating from Italy and some from Russia, and that's where they started back in the early 1900s. And so the book that I wrote is about the whole, experience with, my grandparents starting out, and it goes into my parents' life, into my life, and things that took place in my life. And we talk about the world history and how it revolves around my own family's history. So it's a lot of history, but the whole crux of the book talks about the importance of family and friendship and sticking together with God at the center, because what I talk about, Mike, in the book, and I'm going to talk about in the episodic series and show, is how do we get through hard times? Well, we need each other. We can't isolate. We were not created to do this alone. I talk about the scripture in Ecclesiastes where it says, 2 are better than 1. For when one falls, the other one picks the other one up, and pity the man who's alone.
Yeah.
We were never intended to do it alone. And since the pandemic, people have isolated. People have been alone. And I couldn't understand why I wrote the book at the time, because I wrote it just before the pandemic. Thought I was just writing a story for my family and to encourage people to get together. And then the pandemic hit, and here I'm releasing this book about talking about the importance of getting together, and nobody can get together,
Well, it sounds like everybody needs to read this book right now, because since the pandemic, we haven't resumed getting together like we used to.
Yeah. So, and I'm getting beautiful letters from people. It's really growing every day. The book is continuing to sell. And I think it's because it's encouraging, and it isn't it's about me and my family, but it's really about everyone.
Also,
and how did people do it back then? They stuck together.
Your family's very interesting. Your family's very interesting.
Yeah.
That has helped move the story along.
Yeah, I mean, my father, we talk about how he was in the Korean War and how he was taken prisoner by the Russians, and he was tortured back then. And we talk about how then Senator Kennedy, because we came from Boston, and so did he, Senator Kennedy was instrumental in his rescue.
Wow.
And how Senator Kennedy came to my grandmother's home and helped us. And my mother, for example, another story in there is she went to school with the Boston Strangler, but didn't know that until later.
Yeah.
And her and her classmates, they were very. It was a very close class. They couldn't believe who he was and what came of him. It was just incredible. And then my father grew up with Leonard Nimoy. So there's stories like that in there.
Yeah. Grew up with Leonard Nimoy and growing up with the Boston Strangler. Yeah, I forget, JFK represented Boston area when he was elected to Congress and he elected to the Senate. So fascinating story.
My family was really blessed to, get to know him, personally.
I wonder when people watch this series, it's so fantastic that they'll think it's made up. I hope they know this is a real, true story.
Yeah, we have documentation. In fact, we have a letter from then Senator Kennedy to my grandmother saying how he was looking for them. We did have a photo of him with my grandmother, giving her the news at the time that he was missing in action. But we lost the photo. We have no idea what happened to it.
That's a shame.
Yeah. But we have letters and documentation, which helps.
Well, I would ask you when do we get to see the series, but we don't know because there's a writer's strike. If anybody's watching this video at any time, this is the last day of May in 2023, and we're in the middle of a writer's strike, and that's slowing you down. Is that frustrating for you, Iris?
Well, to be honest, Vincent and I were working so hard at writing the series that we needed a break. So to me, I'm looking at it as a break. And they expect it to last maybe till August, but they're not sure. Since the 1950s, there's probably been 8 writers' strikes.
Yeah.
The last one was in 2007.
I remember that,
and so here we are striking again, and there are reasons, there are legitimate reasons.
Well, there's a lot more at stake now because things were made for TV and they're on and it's over, but now they're out there and they're out there forever. and it's just a
Yeah,
different
and
different.
television has changed so much and grown, and you've got all this streaming and all these things, and so it was probably time for that. But when it ends, we'll be ready, and we'll be able to go before the networks, and one will be chosen to take on the series. I know that Judy Bell, my producer, works mainly with Netflix, so there's a good chance that that may be the one that ends
Yeah.
up getting picked, but we'll see.
Yeah.
It's a fun process at this point.
I could talk to you forever, Iris. They're signaling me. We've gone way past time, but we want to have you back. We want to hear an update on how that's going and hear updates on Vincent off at boot camp. And he's in the reserve, so he'll be back to work soon, I'm sure.
Yeah, he'll be back in July to be able to work with me again. And, in the writer's strike, it may all work together with the writer's strike ending, and
Yeah.
he'll be back. And, in the meantime, I'm taking a badly needed break.
Yeah. I encourage all of our viewers, go to irisfsmith.com. I just looked at it just a moment ago before we came on the air. irisfsmith.com. Anything else you want our viewers to know, Iris, before we go?
No, I guess, the book, like I said, just continues to sell and be encouraging to people. There's a lot of life lessons in the book that help us with today's challenges, especially with isolating and depression. I talk about in the book how to get around a lot of that. And the way, honestly, is to connect with other people. And, the other thing is, if you want to have a friend, you have to first be a friend. And we don't get from taking, we get from first giving. And
Well,
so
it's about family, and if you don't think it is, read Iris's book, Never Alone. I guess you get on Amazon and all the other places?
Yeah, it's kind of everywhere at this point. And, there's, if you go to irisfsmith.com, it gives you a lot of information on the story and also how to, get it. And there's home movies on there. There's a trailer about the book. And, lots of information if they want to go there and see more.
Let me ask you this, since I'm getting older, it's a chore to read. I can't see anymore. I've been listening to these audio books. Is it out on audio yet?
Yes, it's available on Audible. Yeah.
Audible. Yeah, that's right. Whose voice is on reading the book?
His name is Don Hemley. He was a friend of mine, and he went ahead and challenged himself with going ahead and doing
That's
a reading
great.
book. He had done commercials and things like that,
Yeah.
but he had never done a whole book, and I thought he did a superb job.
That
Took
is
some
great.
doing, but we did it.
Well, thanks for doing that. For those of us whose eyes are going, we really appreciate that, Iris. Thanks for coming on the show. We'll have you back in a month or so and get an update.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Nice to be here again.
We'll be back with more Briggs on Books right after this.